Good morning, y'all. Today we have another lesson, and before you get started, you need to make sure you have your textbook, you need a pencil, and you need the worksheet called Number 8, Note-Taking Skills. It's the Chapter 1, Section 3, Types of Government. And this is the third time you're doing this notes setup. We have one more section like this, and then for the next chapter, you're going to move on to another type of notes. But we're going to stick with this one 2 more times just to make sure you get the hang of it. Alright, just to review, on your worksheet, the left column is the page numbers of where you're going to find your answers. In the main ideas, you should put your headings, your subheadings, your vocabulary words, and your smaller black words. In your details is where you describe your main idea. And then you all have been turning in things to me and forgetting this last section, your questions and comments. You need to make sure that as you read, if a question pops up in your head, you read something and it's interesting to you, write it over there. Ask a question. Get out of the book. Think more than just what's on that page. That is what that column is for. And you will not get a full grade if it is not complete. Alright, now before we read, we want to make sure that we attack our reader's guide here. So let's see what what we should expect when we read. Our key terms: autocracy, monarchy, oligarchy, democracy, republic, political party, free enterprise. So those are the words that you are going to look for in blue throughout the reading. Now, let's see what we should find out. What are the main characteristics of a democracy? And why is free enterprise conducive to the growth and preservation of democracy? And conducive means essential, pretty much. So another way to phrase that question would be, why do we need free enterprise to keep democracy alive? Let's keep going. Understanding concepts. Cultural pluralism. How does a representative democracy provide a good government for diverse peoples? So basically, why is it important that all races and cultures are represented? Why does that matter? So let's think about that as we go through our reading. And then let's read through our cover story. Title is Democracy Assaulted. Assaulted means attacked, as you know. And this takes place in Beijing, China in June 1989. Some 10,000 Chinese troops surprised sleeping protesters in Tiananmen Square early this morning. The brutal assault, one of the worst days of bloodshed in Communist China's history, came after 7 weeks of demonstrations by students calling for democracy. The protesters scattered in terror as soldiers sprayed them with automatic weapons fire. Once government forces gained control of the 100-acre square, they used a tank to crush the goddess of democracy, a 33-foot plaster and styrofoam statue that students had erected. The Chinese Red Cross put the death toll at almost 2,600. So, in this article here, all these Chinese protesters wanted democracy rather than communism, and they were killed for it. This was 1989. That is just about 25 years ago. So, communism, democracy going against each other. We will learn about the kind of government that does this, that did this to these students, the kind of government that assaulted these students for protesting in favor of democracy. Alright, let's get started on our notes. I've given you the first one, but I'll show you how I got there. I'm going to read, we need major types of government we're getting our main ideas down right now. Sorry, we're not moving on to details just yet. I jumped ahead of the gun. So main ideas. On this page you have major types of government. That's blue. Then you have a red. Then you have a black down here. So the blue is number 1, major types of government. Autocracy is number 2, the red. And totalitarian dictatorship is number 3. Totalitarian dictatorship is number 3. Moving on. Monarchy. You got a blue, you got a black, a blue, and a red, and a red, and a blue. Okay. We have a lot here. Monarchy is going to be number 4. Absolute monarchs is going to be number 5. Constitutional monarchs is going to be number 6. Oligarchy, I'm going to bunch that together for number 7. Democracy, I'm going to bunch that together to be number 8. Okay, on this page, we have black, blue, big blue. Okay. Direct democracy is going to be number 9. Representative democracy is going to be number 10. Republic is going to be number 11. And characteristics of democracy is going to be number 12. Okay, you should have flipped your page over to prepare for number 13. On this page we have red. Don't count this right here. We'll just put the red. So individual liberty is number 13. Majority rule with minority rights is number 14. Indo versus the United States is number 15. Moving on to the next page, we have red and black. Free elections is number 16. One person, one vote is number 17. Competing political, we have a red, we have a blue, we have a blue, and we have a red and a red and a blue. I'm going to combine these red and blue. No, never mind. Subtract that. I don't want to combine these. Competing political parties is going to be number 18. Political party is number 19. The soil of democracy is number 20. Active citizen participation is number 21. A favorable economy is number 22. And free enterprise is number 23. And our last page, we have red, black. I have combined these two and these two. So widespread education is number 24. Strong civil society is number 25. A social consensus is number 26. So down here. So that is going to be number 3. Number 3 should say totalitarian dictatorship, and this sentence right here. Government not responsible to people. People lack power to limit rulers. Put that sentence there. Okay. Okay, now we're moving on to number 4. And number 4, you should have written monarchy. I'm going to read from these 5 lines right here, monarchy, until we hit our next word, which is absolute monarchs, but I'm going to stop in between. Monarchy is another form of autocratic government. In a monarchy, a king, queen, or emperor exercises the supreme powers of a government. Monarchs usually inherit their positions. So for number 4, I might put monarchs inherit their positions. And then in parentheses, I might put king, queen, emperor. So I put inherited leadership and then king, queen, emperor there for number 4. Just to show who rules. In all of these, I want to know, in all these different kinds of government, the difference is who rules. And here it's king, queen, somebody that inherited that position. Okay, moving on Number 5, you should have written absolute monarchs. I'm going to read here to the rest of this paragraph, and then we're going to write our answer in number 5. Absolute monarchs have complete and unlimited power to rule their people. The king of Saudi Arabia, for example, is such an absolute monarch. Absolute monarchs are rare today, but from the 1400s to the 1700s, kings or queens with an absolute powers ruled most of Western Europe. Okay, so number 5, absolute monarchs. We know from up here where you wrote that monarchy is inherited, that this position is inherited. So absolute monarch is inherited and has complete unlimited power. So inherited position, complete unlimited power is absolute monarch. Complete, absolute, unlimited, absolute. The vocabulary should help you there. Now, moving on to number 6, constitutional monarchs. This is going to be a little different from absolute monarchs. Let's read this last paragraph here. Today, some countries such as Great Britain, Sweden, Japan, and the Netherlands have constitutional monarchs. These monarchs share governmental powers with elected legislatures or serve mainly as the ceremonial leaders of their governments. So, constitutional monarch here in number 6. So before I go on, this is what they have in England. You know, England still has a queen, and the queen is not like she's an absolute monarch. She doesn't have complete and unlimited power. The queen works with other governmental powers and elected people and is a ceremonial lead. So that's number 6. They share powers with elected people and are ceremonial leaders of their government. That's number 6. Okay, now we are moving on to oligarchy in number 7. And I'm going to read this whole 2 paragraphs because that's the only word in here. Then we're going to answer it. And keep in mind what you're writing here is who is ruling. So look for who is ruling in an oligarchy. Oligarchy. An oligarchy is any system of government in which a small group holds power. The group derives its power from wealth, military power, social position, or a combination of these elements. Sometimes religion is the source of power. Today, the governments of communist countries such as China are mostly oligarchies. In such countries, leaders in the Communist Party and the armed forces control the government. Both dictatorships and oligarchies sometimes claim they rule for the people. Such governments may try to give the appearance of control by the people. For example, they might hold elections but offer only one candidate or control the election result in other ways. Such governments may also have some type of legislature or national assembly elected by or representing the people. These legislatures, however, approve only policies and decisions already made by the leaders. As in a dictatorship, oligarchies usually suppress all political opposition, sometimes ruthlessly. Okay, now, oligarchy, the details, I want who is in control here. And if you look back at the definition, any system of government in which a small group holds power. So you just put right here, small group holds power. And it is worth noting, you don't have to put it, but you can think about it. It says down here, oligarchies usually suppress all political opposition, sometimes ruthlessly. So oligarchy and a totalitarian dictatorship kind of go hand in hand in being ruthless towards their people sometimes. Alright, moving on to democracy. Alright, now I have democracy, and we need to do our details. So let's read this 2 paragraphs right here. Democracy. A democracy is any system of government in which rule is by the people. The term democracy comes from the Greek demos, meaning the people, and kratia, meaning rule. The ancient Greeks used the word democracy to mean government by the many, in contrast to government by the few. Pericles, a great leader of ancient Athens, declared, "Our constitution is named democracy because it is in the hands not of the few, but of the many." The key idea of democracy is that the people hold sovereign power. Abraham Lincoln captured the spirit best when he described democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So, democracy details who is the charge of this kind of government. Rule is by the people, so you can put the people here, but then you have to separate it from oligarchy, because oligarchy is also people, but oligarchy is few people, and democracy is many people, so many. So this should say rule by many people. Okie dokie. So now we are on to number 9. You should have put direct democracy down here. And to fill in the details, we are going to go read this paragraph right here. Democracy may take one of two forms. In a direct democracy, the people govern themselves by voting on issues individually as citizens. Direct democracy exists only in very small societies where citizens can actually meet regularly to discuss and decide key issues and problems. Direct democracy is still found in some New England town meetings and in some of the smaller states called cantons of Switzerland. No country today, however, has a government based on direct democracy. Okay, so you might have thought, well, America is a direct democracy, but in fact we are not, and we'll learn about what kind we are in a minute. Before we move on, let's put our detail for direct democracy. And who rules in a direct democracy? People govern themselves by voting on issues individually as citizens. That's what I would put for number 9. People govern themselves by voting on issues individually as citizens. Okay, moving on to number 10. Up here it said democracy may take one of two forms. This is the first form, direct democracy. And then number 10 is representative democracy. So I'm going to read from here, and I'm going to stop before we get to republic. In an indirect or representative democracy, the people elect representatives and give them the responsibility and power to make laws and conduct government. An assembly of the people's representatives may be called a council, a legislature, a congress, or a parliament. Representative democracy is practiced in cities, states, provinces, and countries where the population is too large to meet regularly in one place. It is the most efficient way to ensure that the rights of individual citizens who are part of a large group are represented. Okay, let's stop there. This is the kind of democracy that America is. We are a representative democracy because, and this is what should go in your details for number 10, here. People elect representatives and give them the responsibility and power to make laws and conduct government. Okay, so that should go there for number 10, the definition. And just to explain that a little further, for example, in America, we elect the president, but you can also go to the polls and elect your representatives in the House of Representatives. You can vote for your senators, all of those people, the senators in the House of Representatives, the Congress is supposed to represent the people. So we vote for the people to be put into Congress, and then Congress makes decisions and laws that in turn affect us. So we're going to vote for the people that we want to, whose ideas we agree with. So that is number 10, representative democracy. The people elect representatives and give them the responsibility and power to make laws and conduct government. All right, for our next word, for number 11, we should be looking for republic. I'm going to read from here to here, and I'm sorry I cut it off by putting this over it, so just if you need to look in a book, you can, but I'll still read it the way it is. In a republic, voters are the source of the government's authority. Elected representatives who are responsible to the people exercise that power. As Benjamin Franklin was leaving the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, a woman approached him and asked, "What kind of government have you given us, Dr. Franklin, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin answered, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." Franklin's response indicated that the founders preferred a republic over a monarchy, but that a republic requires citizen participation. For most Americans today, the terms representative democracy, republic, and constitutional republic mean the same thing: a system of limited government where the people are the ultimate source of governmental authority. It should be understood, however, that throughout the world, not every democracy is a republic. Great Britain, for example, is a democracy but not a republic because it has a constitutional monarch as its head of state. Okay, so back to our term number 11, republic. If you look up here, who's in power in a republic? Voters are the source of the government's authority. You could just put that down in a republic. Voters are the source of the government's authority in a republic. Okay, now we should be looking for characteristics of democracy, which is number 12. And I'm going to have to end up changing the page, but we'll start here with characteristics of democracy. We're looking for specific things about democracy that make it democracy and not something else. So I'll read this and then I'll go to the next page. Today, some nations of the world misuse the word democracy. Many countries call their governments democratic or republican, whether they really are or not. The government of North Korea, for example, is an oligarchy because a small number of Communist Party leaders run the government. Yet their country is called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. A true democratic government, as opposed to one that only uses the term democratic in its name, has characteristics that distinguish it from other forms of government. Keep reading, we can look for those characteristics. Alright, so I can already tell you for number 12, characteristics of democracy, that we have two of them, just by the way this chapter is set up. This reading is set up. So the first one, individual liberty. The second one is majority rule with minority rights. So write both of those phrases down here in the details for number 12. Now, number 13, we're going to go into depth about what individual liberty is. So we're going to read through this and decide what it is. No individual, of course, can be completely free to do absolutely anything he or she wants. That would result in chaos. Rather, democracy requires that all people be as free as possible to develop their own capacities. Government in a democracy works to promote the kind of equality in which all people have an equal opportunity to develop their talents to the fullest extent possible. So number 13, individual liberty. This sentence right here, all people be as free as possible to develop their own capacities. That is what I would put over here as what individual liberty means. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. It means that the law and the government provides you with the opportunities to reach your potential no matter where you come from, what race you are, what religion you are, how much money you have, etc. You have the opportunities to fill a potential, but it doesn't mean you can do anything you want and it'd be okay. Moving on to number 14, majority rule with minority rights. And it's that is self-explanatory, but I'll read it anyway. Democracy also requires that government decisions be based on majority rule. In a democracy, people usually accept decisions made by the majority of voters in a free election. Representative democracy means that laws enacted in the legislatures represent the will of the majority of lawmakers. Because these lawmakers are elected by the people, the laws are accepted by the people. At the same time, the American concept of democracy includes a concern about the possible tyranny of the majority. The Constitution helps ensure that the rights of individuals in the minority will be protected. Respect for minority rights can be difficult to maintain, especially when society is under great stress. For example, during World War II, the government imprisoned more than 100,000 Japanese Americans in relocation camps because it feared they would be disloyal. The relocation program caused severe hardships for many Japanese Americans and deprived them of their basic liberties. Even so, the program was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1944 in Korematsu versus the United States and in one other similar case. And we'll look at that in a second. But let's go back to number 14, majority rule with minority rights. Majority rule just means that this sentence right here. In a democracy, people usually accept decisions made by the majority of voters in a free election. So somebody has to win the election. People get the right to vote, and then whatever the most people vote for is what happens. And so that'd be the majority rule. And then minority rights. The Constitution helps ensure that the rights of individuals in the minority will be protected. So even if their laws and things that they wanted to happen aren't passed, they can still have their freedom of speech, their freedom of religion, all that stuff, minority rights. So put those answers over there with number 14. Okay, now we're going to answer number 15, which is the Indo versus United States, and we're going to do the details. I'm going to read this part, but I'm not going to come back to it. So before we read that, I'm going to show you this picture right here. It says more than 100,000 people of Japanese descent were placed in camps during World War II. About 70,000 of these were American born. What kind of recompense did internment victims receive in the 1980s? And we'll find that out in a minute. But basically, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, as you should know, the Japanese bombed America, and that brought us into the World War II. And at that time, we had a lot of Japanese people living in California, specifically San Francisco. And most of those people, actually all Japanese, were moved to these relocation camps. And some people have called them concentration camps because the conditions weren't ideal. But these people, no matter if they were spies or not, were moved into these camps. And after all these years, they have never found one person who was a spy. And so basically, the government at the time used racial tendencies to place these people in camps just because they were Japanese or of Japanese descent. So this landmark case we're going to read about has to do with that. I'm going to read this. We're going to go to the next page, and we're going to finish it on there. I just want to write a summary about what Indo versus the United States is in number 15. All right, Indo versus the United States. In the same year as the Korematsu case, the Supreme Court did uphold the rights of Mitsui Indo. A native-born citizen, Indo was fired from a California state job in 1942 and sent to a relocation center. Her lawyer challenged the War Relocation Authority's right to detain a loyal American citizen. The case finally reached the Supreme Court in 1944. On the day after the exclusionary order was revoked by the military commander, the court ruled that Mitsui Indo could no longer be held in custody. Justice Frank Murphy wrote, "Detention and relocation centers of people of Japanese ancestry, regardless of loyalty, is not only unauthorized by Congress or the executive, but is another example of the unconstitutional resort to racism inherent in the entire evacuation program. Racial discrimination of this nature bears no reasonable relation to military necessity, and is utterly foreign to the ideals and traditions of American people. Justice Frank Murphy, 1944. In recent years, the wartime relocation program has been criticized as a denial of individual rights and as proof that tyranny can occur in even the most democratic societies. In 1988, Congress acknowledged the grave injustice of the relocation experience and offered payments of $20,000 to those Japanese Americans still living who had been relocated. So for number 15, Indo versus United States, this is what I want you to write. I don't want you to write all these details and all that stuff. Just write the outcome of it, which is this right here. Has been criticized as a denial of individual rights and as proof that tyranny can occur in even the most democratic societies. So put that sentence there as what the Indo versus United States case ended up doing for America at the time. Alright, now we should move on to number 16. And number 16, you should have written free elections, and then we're going to read the section and write our notes over here. Now, I'm going to, since we have our next term down here, I'm going to just read the first paragraph, and then we'll write our answer. As we have seen, democratic governments receive their legitimacy by the consent of the governed. The authority to create and run the government rests with the people. All genuine democracies have free and open elections. Free elections give people the chance to choose their leaders and to voice their opinions on various issues. Free elections also help ensure that public officials pay attention to the wishes of the people. Okay, so for number 16, I want you to write these two sentences in your own words, or shorten them, just put the main ideas from them. Free elections give people the chance to choose their leaders and to voice their opinions on various issues. Free elections also help ensure that public officials pay attention to the wishes of the people. Okay, moving on. On number 17, you should have written one person, one vote. And so we're going to read this paragraph right here to see what that means and what we should put in our details for number 17. In a democracy, several characteristics mark free elections. First, everyone's vote carries the same weight, a principle often expressed in the phrase one person, one vote. Second, all candidates have the right to express their views freely, giving voters access to competing ideas. Third, citizens are free to help candidates or support issues. Fourth, the legal requirements for voting, such as age, residence, and citizenship, are kept to a minimum. Thus, racial, ethnic, religious, or other discriminatory tests cannot be used to restrict voting. Fifth, citizens may vote freely by secret ballot without coercion or fear of punishment for their voting decisions. Now, all this discriminatory test can't be used. That was not always the case back after slavery was ended in the South. Mississippi and other southern states did have literacy tests to vote, and a lot of African Americans at the time couldn't vote because they couldn't pass those literacy tests. So this has changed in the last 100 years or 200 years. Okay, but we need to know, what does one person, one vote mean? Everyone's vote carries the same weight. Principle often expressed in the phrase one person, one vote. That right there. Every vote carries the same weight. That is 17. Moving on. Okay, now on to competing political parties, which should be number 18. Now, we have competing political parties, but then we also have political party. For this one, I'm going to read all of it. So, when I'm looking for competing political parties, I'm going to look for are there more than one, what are their names, stuff like that for a political party. And then political party, I want to see what an actual political party is. So for the first one, what are the names of the competing political parties, and then what is a political party? So, here we go. Political parties are an important element of democratic government. A political party is a group of individuals with broad common interests who organize to nominate candidates for office, win elections, conduct government, and determine public policy. In the United States, while any number of political parties may compete, a two-party system in which the Republicans and the Democrats have become the major political parties has developed. Rival parties help make elections meaningful. They give voters a choice among candidates. They also help simplify and focus attention on key issues for voters. Finally, in democratic countries, the political party or parties that are out of power serve as a loyal opposition. That is, by criticizing the policies and actions of the party in power, they can help make those in power more responsible to the people. So for number 18, competing political parties, you could put the names a two-party system, Republicans and Democrats. You can put that for number 18. You can also put for number 18, this part down here, what happens when you have competing political parties. They can help make those in power more responsible to the people. So you can put Republicans and Democrats, and then they can help make those in power more responsible to the people. Number 19, political party. What is the definition of a political party? It's right here. A group of individuals with broad common interests to organize, to nominate candidates for office, win elections, conduct government, and determine public policy. Put that in your own words. You don't have to write all of it. You can shorten it if you want for here. Alright, next we are looking at number 20. You guys should have written here, the soil of democracy. I'm going to start reading here and we'll see what we find. Soil meaning I'm thinking here it means the growth of democracy. Where does it come from? But we'll see. Historically, few nations have practiced democracy. One reason may be that real democracy seems to require a special environment. That environment's the soil, so let's keep reading. Democratic government is more likely to succeed in countries which to some degree meet 5 general criteria that reflect the quality of life of citizens. Okay? I'm guessing that, I can't go to the next page without getting away from the screen, but I'm guessing that it says we need 5 general criteria. I'm guessing this is 1 criteria, 2 criteria, and that there's 3 on the next page. So if you want to, for the soil of democracy, you can go ahead and put in number 20, active citizen participation and a favorable economy for number 20, and then go ahead and flip to the next page and look at the other 3. Okay? And write those here. Number 21 is active citizen participation. Democracy requires citizens who are willing to participate in civic life. Countries in which citizens are able to inform themselves about issues, to vote in elections, to serve on juries, to work for candidates, and to run for government office are more likely to maintain a strong democracy than countries where citizens do not participate fully in their government. So for number 21, you can sum this up. You can even just put a democracy requires citizens who are willing to participate in civic life. That sentence would be enough. If you want to give more, you can give some examples that they've listed here and write those also in number 21. Number 22, a favorable economy. This should be number 22. Democracy succeeds more in countries that do not have extremes of wealth and poverty that have a large middle class. The opportunity to control one's economic decisions provides a base for making independent political decisions. Before we keep reading, I want you to put for number 22, favorable economy, put this right here. That democracy works where there's not extremes of wealth and poverty and there's a large middle class. So that should go somehow in your own words to number 22. Number 23 is free enterprise, and we're going to get that pretty quickly here. In the United States, this concept is called free enterprise. If people do not have control of their economic lives, they will not likely be free to make political decisions. So free enterprise, you can make your own economic decisions. That's what free enterprise is. People in a democracy can make their own economic decisions. That's number 23. All right, number 24 is going to be widespread education, but I'm going to finish reading this part. Countries with Countries with stable, growing economies seem better able to support democratic government. In the past, autocrats who promised citizens jobs and food have toppled many democratic governments during times of severe economic depression. People who are out of work or unable to feed their families often become more concerned about security than about voting or exercising other political rights. So that gives some more details about how a favorable economy, down here, number 22, how a favorable economy helps a democratic government succeed. Okay, moving on to number 24. We're almost done. Number 24, you should have written widespread education. So let's read and see what that is about. Democracy is more likely to succeed in countries with an educated public. The debate over public education in America was settled in the 1830s. For example, in 1835, Pennsylvania voted to fund public schools. Thaddeus Stevens, speaking to the Pennsylvania state legislature in favor of the funding legislation, said, "If an elective republic is to endure for any great length of time, every elector must have sufficient information to direct wisely the legislature, the ambassadors, and the executive of the nation. It is the duty of government to see that the means of information be diffused to every citizen." Thaddeus Stevens, April 1835. So what I chose from this to write for number 24 is this very first sentence. Democracy is more likely to succeed in countries with an educated public. And I wrote that because on the page before for number 20, we had put the soil of democracy, and we had put the 5 things. This is the third aspect of the soil of democracy. So what this shows that an educated public is one of the foundations of a good democracy. All right, number 25, strong civil society. Strong civil society. Democracy is not possible without a civil society, a complex network of voluntary associations, economic groups, religious organizations, and many other kinds of groups that exist independently of government. The United States has thousands of such organizations: the Red Cross, the Humane Society, the Sierra Club, the National Rifle Association, your local church and newspaper, labor unions, and business groups. These organizations give citizens a way to make their views known to government officials and the general public. They also give citizens a means to take responsibility for protecting their rights, and they give everyone a chance to learn about democracy by participating in it. So for strong civil society, you can write the definition of a civil society, a network of associations, blah, blah, blah. Or you can write, this part right here about the importance of these civil society organizations, that they give citizens a way to make their views known to government officials and the general public. And last but not least, 26th, a social consensus. Social consensus. Democracy also prospers where most people accept democratic values such as individual liberty and equality for all. Such countries are said to have a social consensus. There also must be general agreement about the purpose and limits of government. History shows that conditions in the American colonies favored the growth of democracy. Many individuals had an opportunity to get ahead economically. The American colonists were among the most educated people of the world at the time. Thomas Jefferson remarked that Americans seemed to have deposited the monarchical and taken up the Republican government with as much ease as they would throwing off an old and putting on a new suit of clothes. The English heritage provided a consensus of political and social values. In time, the benefits of democracy would extend to all Americans. So, a social consensus. Consensus means you both agree on, or you agree on something. So, you can put anything from this first paragraph here. People accept democratic values. Most people accept democratic values such as individual liberty and equality for all. general agreement about purposes and limits of government. Anything from there would be fine for a social consensus. Okay, so at this time, you should be finished with the front and the back, and you need to turn it into me. So we looked over the different types of government, but this section mostly focused on a democratic government and all the characteristics of it. So you should know now 5 characteristics of democratic government, which we just looked at. In the next assignment, you're going to be doing your Section 3 wrap-up with a few activities in your composition books, and then we have one more section after that, and we'll be almost done with our first chapter. All right, give this to me, turn it in, and see you later. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.